flow.
Welcome to episode 33 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. If you're a new listener and you enjoy the show, we would really appreciate it if you give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you enjoy the content, it would be a big time help if you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. All right, everybody. As of Sunday, August 29th, 2021, we are getting closer and closer to the start of NHL training camp for the 2021-22 season. And there's been some juicy things that have happened recently. Jesperi Kotkaniemi was tendered an offer sheet by the Carolina Hurricanes. So you're going to want to stay tuned for our thoughts on that.
For those listening, I'm smiling, by the way.
Oh, it's going to be great. I promise you want to hear our thoughts on that.
Oh.
But most of this episode is going to be dedicated to some hockey betting stuff. We are going to go over Team Total Points futures, courtesy of DraftKings Sportsbook. So we are going to go division by division, and we're going to look at the points over-unders for each team. We're going to discuss our thoughts on that. And like I said, we are going to get into the Jesperi Kotkaniemi offer sheet as well. But before we get into all that, it is time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing, man?
Doing well, Anthony Bruno. It is raining cats and dogs here in Ottawa, but smile on my face because we're getting in a Gluttons For Punishment podcast, episode 33. Shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, Al Iafrate, who once recorded a slap shot in the All-Star Game skills competition of, I believe it was 105.2 miles per hour. And that record stood forever. It was finally beaten by Chara, but I still give Iafrate the belt because he did it with a wood stick. And if I remember correctly, weird stat about Al Iafrate, I think I remember Don Cherry saying in one of the Rock'em Sock'ems that he had a size 14 foot. So if anyone knows that for sure, comment down below about the size of Al Iafrate's foot.
I love it, man. The Al Iafrate shout out.
Yeah,
what a beast.
He was one of those guys, like a lot of kids, he was their favorite player because like he can shoot the puck hard, right? He's just like so exciting. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I love it, Lepore. Great shout out. But let's jump right into this episode, man, because we got lots to discuss here. And let's start things off in the Atlantic Division. So when I was looking at the point totals on DraftKings Sportsbook, and I was I was organizing all the divisions, I kind of looked at this division as a stars and scrubs division based on the point totals. And I'll run them down for you here and explain why. So we start things off with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Their over-under point total is set at 108.5. So they're projected to finish first in the Atlantic Division. Mm-hmm. Second is your Toronto Maple Leafs at 106.5 points. And actually, the Leafs have the second highest team point total in the Eastern Conference. So right now, Vegas pretty much thinks that the Leafs are a top 3 team, let's call it, in the Eastern Conference. So they got Tampa number 1, Leafs number 2, Boston coming in at number 3 at 103.5 points. The Florida Panthers next at 101.5. So all 4 of those teams, Lightning, Leafs, Bruins, Panthers, all have an over-under of over 100 points. Yeah. And that is the only division in the entire NHL that is projected like that.
Yeah.
And the reason I call this a stars and scrubs division, because in the bottom 4 teams in this division, the books just do not like these teams. So Montreal, after getting to the Stanley Cup final this past season, they're at 89.5 points for this upcoming season. Then you have Detroit, 77.5. The Ottawa Senators, their over-under point total, just 72.5. And then you have the Buffalo Sabres at the basement of the Atlantic Division, 68.5 total points that team is projected for. So, Lepore, your initial thoughts on these point totals in the Atlantic Division. And I guess we can start things off with, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
With your Toronto Maple Leafs. So the number was what? 106.5 over under. I'm going to say this a lot throughout the show. So this, when I see over unders, what I try to do is I try to look at a point total that is over that number and below that number and ask myself, like, what's more likely? So I look at the Leafs at that number and I ask myself, what's more likely? Say, let's use 10 points. The Leafs getting 116, 117 points, or like 96, 97 points, where it's like they get to like a wild card spot. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think it's more likely that we see the latter. I think it's more likely that we see a situation where the Leafs are still a really good team, but not a bonkers team, make the playoffs semi-comfortably. But I don't see that situation. And I hope I'm wrong here. This is a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast. I don't see that situation where the Leafs are fighting for like 120 points, like getting to a total like that. So looking at it evenly at 106.5, I think a number below that is a lot more likely. So on the Toronto Maple Leafs, I will pick the under.
Ooh, okay, Lepore.
Ooh.
But you know,
not a homer, everybody. Not a homer. Take that.
And there it is for all you trolls in the comments that call us homers. Unbelievable. But anyway, no, Lepore, you make some really good points there. And you know, just going back to last season, and listen, I know everyone said it was the Canadian division and the division sucked and this and that, and it was all these cupcake teams. Well, first of all, the Canadian division, I think, proved that it was a lot better than people realized. And I mean, obviously, we saw the Montreal Canadiens get to the Stanley Cup final against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And obviously, the Leafs had a really good season. You had Connor McDavid, who had one of the greatest offensive seasons we've ever seen. So I think that division, it was really blown out of proportion just in terms of the amount of just vitriol and just BS that was spewed towards the competitiveness of that division. Mm-hmm. But the Leafs last season played at a 113 point pace. Okay. And I get it. They just played, the same teams all year, the same 6 teams all year. Right. But they did play at a 113 point pace. But saying that, I do tend to agree more with Lepore here, because I would take the under as well of 106.5 points. I just 107 points. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And there's like the really good teams, the team that wins the President's Trophy, they're going to go nuts. They're going to get, 115 points, something in that range. But I just think over the course of an 82 game season, I think the Leafs are probably going to get over 100 points, but I think they're going to fall somewhere between like 100 and 105.
Sure.
Like, I think they're going to make the playoffs. For the people out there that think they're not going to make the playoffs, just look at what the books are saying right now.
Yeah, and breathe, everybody. Breathe.
Right.
Breathe.
Like, despite all the bullshit from last season, embarrassing themselves in the first round against Montreal, the books still have the Leafs finishing with the second highest point total in the entire Eastern Conference behind the Tampa Bay Lightning. But yeah, 106.5 points. I'm taking the under on that, Lepore. And just to look at the Leafs' history, is it 105 points that's their franchise record?
It might be. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's a good season. But if you look at it with some perspective of this team's over 100 years old, and that's the most points they've ever got. Like, they've never had 110 point season. It's in and around there. It's like 105 or 106 or something.
Yeah, I'm just checking it right now. So it is 105. In 2017, 2018, The Leafs had 105 points. That was the first year they lost to the Bruins in the first round of the playoffs in 7 games. But yeah, man, I'm taking the under on that. And any other thoughts on any of the other teams in this division?
Just going through them quickly. One that really jumped out at me actually was the Sens, because like, what do they have them at? Like 72 points,
72.5.
And again, like my thought process before, it's like, what's more likely, the Sens getting 62 points or 82 points? So I look, I'm like, I don't think they're that bad, that they're going to be like a bad team. And I think there's a chance that, yeah, the young team up and coming, they can surprise people if they gel well, this and that. Like, that number to me, like, I'm going over on that one, just based and like, how bad can they really be? And even I know what Vegas is thinking. They're looking at the division they played in last year. compared to this division where you're playing Tampa, Toronto, Boston, Florida often. So they look at it from the perspective of Ottawa and say, yeah, they have a lot tougher of a road this year because maybe some people compare their points totals from last year. But I'm taking the over on that one. Like, I think that one to me might be the most intriguing in the whole league. Like, for them to think the Sens are going to be that bad.
Yeah, because just looking at the entire Eastern Conference, Lepore, they basically have the Senators. This is DraftKings Sportsbook. I should reiterate that. They have the Senators as the third lowest point total in the entire Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
So they have the Sabres as in dead last. And then actually, Lepore, I lied. They have the Senators as the second worst point total. So it's Buffalo and Ottawa. And then after that, they got Columbus with the third worst. And they have Detroit as better than all three of those teams. So they have Detroit with a higher point total than Ottawa, Buffalo, and Columbus.
Weird one. Yeah, like Ottawa picked 10th overall, 11th overall. So again, like they had that nice run at the end. And again, like I'm not like, you never want to say, oh, it's a slam dunk 100%. This team's going to make the playoffs, but I should get like 72 points. Like, I don't know, like even in the mid to high 70s, like I don't think they're going to be that bad that they're going to be like in the 60s. Like I really feel that way.
Yeah. Like I think it's time for them to take that next step because I'm just looking at their point totals and I'll go back to the last 82 game season that we saw in the NHL. That was 2018, 2019. The Senators finished with 64 points. The year before that, 67 points. I mean, obviously they've been bad for the last 4 years, right?
But those 2 years, they kind of like tanked it in halfway. Then the next year they kind of tanked on purpose. So
exactly, right? Like we all know the Senators have been going through this rebuild, but Lepore, I think I agree with you on this one as well. Like I would take the over, but I think it's like a slight over. Like I don't see this team making the playoffs, but I think there is a pretty high possibility that we see them finish with somewhere between like 72 and 80 points.
Yeah.
Something in that range. So yeah, I would definitely take the over with that as well. The other Canadian team in this division, the Montreal Canadiens, they have the 12th highest team point total in the Eastern Conference. So after getting to the Stanley Cup final, Carey Price reemerging as the Carey Price of old, and the great defensive play that we saw from their top four. Obviously, Shea Weber is going to miss the entire season with the injuries that he's been dealing with. But the books are giving this Habs team no respect whatsoever. They have them finishing with under 90 points. And Lepore, the last 82-game season, like I mentioned, the NHL was in 2018, 2019. You needed 90 points to get into the playoffs. So the Colorado Avalanche were, let's call them the number 16 seed. They got in with 90 points. So,
and that's low. Like that's historic. Usually it's like in the mid 90s, like 94 or 96. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like 90s low.
But yeah, the Habs at 89.5 points. So what's your take on that?
It's kind of funny to me because like we all know how Vegas works. Like when they circle a team, even like circle a specific game, certain teams, certain brands, they pump up. Like people always say, like, I'm a big Notre Dame football fan, and Notre Dame, I think I saw somewhere like over the last 20, 30 years, they're the worst team in all of sports against the spread because it's Notre Dame's. They always give them a few points because it's like, oh, Notre Dame, like when people bet, right? So like with Montreal, what I find weird is like, number one, it's Montreal. And number two, they're coming off the Stanley Cup final. So like that casual bettor thinking like they're going to miss the playoffs, like, oh, I'm taking the over. But Vegas isn't even thinking that way. So you think they would have like kind of like higher than you might think, like, oh, okay, pump the brakes a little bit. But no, they're saying they're fighting for 90 points. So like Vegas has no faith. But to be honest, like that's about where I would put Montreal. Like, I don't think Montreal is bad. Like, I still think they're like in and around that number of where they put them. But if I had to bet on it, oof, the house is on the line. I'll go under, Bruno. I'll go under.
Yeah, I'm taking the under too.
Yeah, I'll go under.
And call us Habs haters if you want, but I think the books are right on the money here with this team because, I mean, you just look at what the Habs have done in the regular season the last 2 years. They had the 18th best record in the regular season this past season when they made it to the Cup final. They had the 24th best record in the league the year before that. when they were invited to the return to play format and took out the Pittsburgh Penguins in the qualifying round. So,
and they missed the playoffs the 2 years before that. Like, people forget, like, and again, like, hate on me all you want. Like, this team hasn't put up a regular season record good enough to make the playoffs in a regular format in 5 seasons.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that year they did make it. That was the year the divisions were all out of whack. Like, the other division was very strong. So like teams like Montreal, the other division benefited, like the lower team benefited from being low, because then they got to play Montreal as opposed to playing Pittsburgh and Washington. So the Rangers played Montreal. Actually, the Rangers beat Montreal. So it was just like, yeah, like they haven't made it legitimately in 5 years, and that one they were out in the first round. So
yeah, the last time they made the playoffs in an 82 game season was 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time. So yeah, I think that number is right on the money. And based on the Shea Weber situation, he's on long-term injured reserve. Like those are big shoes to fill. And I know Habs fans are talking about David Savard and saying that he can provide some of the elements that Shea Weber was able to bring, over the last number of years, being basically the heart and soul of that Habs franchise. But no one is replacing Shea Weber. And then
the man.
And then even their goaltending, right? Like, I know Carey Price was incredible in the playoffs, but Carey Price has not been good in the regular season the last 3 seasons. So, I mean, I know Jake Allen's still there as well, and he's probably going to have a solid year, but you add all those things together. They're still struggling with their depth down the middle at the center position. And, then you have this Kotkaniemi situation, which we'll obviously get into later in the podcast with the offer sheet from the Carolina Hurricanes. But yeah, I'm taking the under as well. Like I right now, I think the Habs are going to miss the playoffs. And maybe at best they're fighting. I think at best they're fighting for a wild card spot. I'll just go out and say.
Yeah. Well, you look at the teams in the division. Like, I don't think anyone objectively can say that this team is going to finish ahead of, and like make the bet that they would finish ahead of at even money, Tampa, Toronto, Florida, or Boston. Like, no, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Not saying it's impossible, but I don't think anyone would lay that bet at even money.
Yeah, exactly. Any other thoughts about this division, Lepore, before we move on to the Metro?
Well, really quickly, Boston was what, 90? No, sorry, Boston was 103 and a half. What do you think about that one? That one's intriguing.
Yeah, that one's, because I'm a little bit lower on Boston. I would take the under on that, because I'm just not as high on this Bruins team. And I think the loss of David Krejci, who went home to play in the Czech Republic, I think that's a big loss for them. Their number 2 center out the door. I think that's going to be a big hit on, their scoring, their top 6. Just, I think David Krejci, and listen, he's not like a superstar player by any means. He's not on the same tier as Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak, but he's a very important player for them. Yeah, and I just go down that roster, and it just doesn't, I just don't get excited looking at that Bruins roster. I just think they're lacking a little bit of talent after their big boys. And yeah, I still think they're going to make the playoffs, but I think I would take the under. Like, I see Boston finishing with maybe in the high 90s, and maybe they hit 100 points, but 103 and a half, I'm definitely taking the under on the Bruins.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. Like, again, I think they're a really good team. I think they'll make the playoffs semi-comfortably. But again, like, I look at the things that are more likely. Like, to me, say at a 5-point gap, like, I don't think Boston's going to push, say, 110 points, but I could see them in the high 90s, like you say. So I would take the under as well.
And what's interesting, actually, Lepore, about these top 4 teams in the Atlantic, Lightning, Leafs, Bruins, and Panthers, DraftKings has them finishing with the 4 highest point totals in the entire Eastern Conference.
Nice.
So they have them finishing with a higher point total than any team in the Metropolitan Division. So
nice.
That shows you that this Atlantic Division, it's going to be tough. And I know there's some bottom feeders as well that, we talked about, like Buffalo and Detroit, and, even if you still view the Senators as a bottom feeder, but those top 4 teams, man, oh man, the Vegas is high on those teams this season.
Something I'll throw out there that's like kind of interesting to look at. So our favorite guy, Dom Lecision, he came out with his total points projections based on his underlying numbers. And I'll just fire through the division quickly. He has Tampa 112, Toronto 108, Florida 102, Boston 102, Montreal 91. This one's shocking. He has the Sabres at 81 points Yeah, he is having like a not bad season. So I found that interesting. He has Detroit at 79, Ottawa at 72. So some of them mirrored pretty well what Vegas did, but like that Buffalo one, I mean, if you believe in Dom Luszczyszyn's model, over, like bet your house.
That's interesting. But you know what? I'll bet you if they trade Eichel, that drops by like 8 points.
Yeah, that it's funny. His model just may represent current rosters. So yeah, good call, Bruno. That is true.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, like if with Eichel, even with Eichel on that roster, yeah, like
81 points
or 81 points. I think that's stretching it a little bit.
It's 500. Like the Sabres, like it's so sad because everyone kind of like loves Buffalo and cheers for Buffalo. It's just sad to be like, there's no way they're going to be a 500 team. You know what I mean? 81 points. Just poor
the sad state of the Buffalo Sabres, man.
Great jerseys though.
Yeah, that's right. At least their jerseys are solid.
Yeah.
Oh God, that team, man. I honestly though, I really hope that they figure it out because I think the NHL really is better when the Buffalo Sabres are a good team.
It's like the Bills in the NFL. Like when Bills fans are everywhere, it's amazing.
Yeah. So I hope that franchise turns it around.
Yeah.
But Lepore, anything else, or should we move on to this Metropolitan division?
Let's go to the Metro because I think the Metro one has a lot of question marks. It's going to be fun.
All right, let's do it, man. Yeah. So when I was breaking down the Metropolitan division and like I said, just organizing all these point totals, I titled this division the most evenly talented. And I'll just run through all the point totals here. Like it is just jam packed and it kind of mirrors what we saw in the East Division this past season. I believe it was called, because I know they changed the names of all the divisions, with COVID and all that, the North Division, the East Division, on and on, right? But it is jam-packed. So coming in at number 1, DraftKings Sportsbook has the New York Islanders finishing atop the division with 99.5 points. Next up is Pittsburgh at 98.5. And then there is a 3-way logjam. The Hurricanes, Capitals, and Rangers, all with the exact same over-under at 95.5 points. Then you have the Philadelphia Flyers at 94.5. The Devils at 90.5. So they have 7 of the 8 teams in this division, DraftKings Sportsbook, finishing with over 90 points. And then you have the Columbus Blue Jackets coming in at the bottom at 76.5. So, you know what? Based on these futures, it looks like anyone could win this Metropolitan division.
Yeah, like seriously,
I don't think anyone would be surprised, even if you see like the Flyers finished first in this division. The Flyers had an unreal year a couple years ago. Last year was a disaster. Their goaltending was a mess. Defensively, they were a mess. But yeah, just based on these over-unders, like anything could happen in this division. So I guess we'll start at the top here, Lepore, with the Islanders coming off back-to-back Final Four appearances, 99.5 points. What's your take on that?
That's a tough one because like it's right in that number of like, yeah, you can totally see that happening and, up or down a bit. I don't say this often, man. Like I'm not that guy who's like, certain teams are built for the playoffs and these teams are built for the regular season. But if there's one example, it's the Islanders. So that being said, I think I'd go under, just saying like they're not like the best regular season team. And I will follow that up by saying if they finish with 96 points, I sure as hell don't want to play them in the first round, right? Because they'd scare the shit out of me. But on that point total, like I don't see the Islanders being like 100-point team.
Okay, and that's fair. And you know what? I'm going to disagree with you here.
Nice.
I actually think the Islanders, I would take the over in this spot. And again, like I don't think it's like, a complete smash the over, like this is a lock. But just going back to last season, they played at a 104-point pace over 56 games.
Okay.
The year before that, so that was the year where they had to do the return to play format. Most teams played, between 68 and 70 games. That season, based on my quick calculations, the Islanders played at a 96-point pace but the year before that played at a 103-point pace in the last 82-game season. So I still think that I really like this team. I like Barry Trotz. I love their defensive structure. They have really solid goaltending. I'm going to take the over, but I think it's like barely going to hit. Like I see this team finishing with probably like 100 points, maybe 101 points.
Exactly.
But I would not be surprised one bit if they kind of take a step back. Like I still think they're going to make the playoffs, but if they take a step back and let's say they're a wild card team this year, instead of, being a top 2 or 3 team in the division. And I know last year in the East Division, where did they finish? They finished in 4th place. Okay. But again, that East Division was like, it was a complete logjam. And, no one really had a read on who was going to emerge from that division. And it just so happens that the 4th seed Islanders ended up making it to the Final Four. But yeah, I would still take the over with them. How about Pittsburgh, Lepore? 98.5. I guess that's like, it's like, okay, that's about right with that team.
Yeah, again. I just love Sid so much, Bruno. 98.5. I'll go over. Screw it. I'll bet on my boy Sid and Pittsburgh kind of making a jump back. They've disappointed in the last few seasons, but I'll have some fun. I'll go over on the Penguins for sure.
Yeah, why the hell not? I think I'd take the over with them as well. They picked up Jeff Carter. He was a big addition for that team last season, late in the year. He actually had a really good finish to the season. But they have question marks in net. But I think the biggest thing with Pittsburgh is like just stay healthy. Exactly. If Malkin can find a way to stay healthy, because that dude has been dealing with so many injuries the last number of years. If he can stay healthy, obviously if Sid can stay healthy, Jake Gensel's been a beast for them recently. So
great player.
I think that team, it's hard. It's hard to bet against Sid, man. And again, even if they finish with like, even if they hit, it's not like this is the be all and end all if they hit, if they're under 98.5 points, but yeah, I still think this team is going to make the playoffs.
Like I find this division really hard because like they're all kind of in that number of like, 98 or 100 where like, let's face it. That's like, that could come down to like how well a team does in shootouts or how often or how early they clinch. So like their last 2-3 games are kind of half-assed, right? Stuff like that. So like those numbers of like 98, 99 for like the good teams is just kind of, flip a coin.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it's so razor thin, especially when you're, like you said, when you're dealing with shootouts and things like that. And games that just go into overtime or the shootout. Right. So that could really have a big effect on the standings, but I'll say over for Pittsburgh. What are your thoughts on some of these other teams here? We don't really need to talk about like Columbus and New Jersey, but like this logjam with Carolina, Washington, the Rangers, and the Flyers, all 95.5 or 94.5 point totals.
I'll take
which team do you think will finish with the most points of those 4 teams, Lepore?
You said the Rangers,
Caps, Rangers, Capitals, Hurricanes, Carolina, and Flyers.
I would probably go with, if I had to guess, again, like you're betting, it's like, what's the projection? What could I see happening? I'd probably say the Rangers, because like what could happen? Like I could see the Rangers being like really good this year. And like, I don't think they're going to be way off of what that number is. You mentioned Philadelphia before, and going back to Dom's model projections for the season, funny. So the Islanders were what, like 99.5 with DraftKings? Yeah. Dom has them at 90 points.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he's really low on them.
Yeah. He's not a fan of the Islanders, and he has Philly at 100, Philly and New York at 100 points tied to lead the division. So like, I see those as possibilities. Like those teams could go off, have really good seasons. So I'd say it's between Philadelphia and New York for the question you asked me. And I'd probably give a little tip to the Rangers. Like, how do you see it?
Yeah. You know what? I like your Rangers call. I think like the easy thing to say is Carolina, just because they've been so good the last few seasons. Yeah. But I think the loss of Dougie Hamilton, who, if you've been listening to the show recently, I'm like the number one Dougie Hamilton fan in the entire world.
Yeah, Bruno's got Dougie Hamilton pajamas.
Oh, he's just the best, Dougie Hamilton. But no, that's a big loss. Like, obviously he signed with the Rangers as a free agent. That's a huge loss for Carolina, and I think that knocks them down a little bit. And I just look at that Rangers team. They got some elite talent, man. Artemi Panarin, who a lot of people believe is an MVP candidate. He was an MVP candidate, I believe, a couple of years ago. Then you got Mika Zibanejad, who for the last 3 seasons has elevated his game to becoming a borderline elite player.
Yeah,
I mean,
great player.
Even a couple of seasons ago, Zibanejad led the NHL in goals per game. So you can say he's an elite player. And then you got Igor Shesterkin in net, who looks like one of the best young goalies in the league. So yeah, Lepore, I agree with you. I
think Fox, bro. Like
Adam Fox, exactly, who just won the damn Norris Trophy. Like they got some talent. So yeah, I would also lean Rangers in that conversation as well, in terms of picking a team of these 4. So like I said, Hurricanes, Capitals, Rangers, and Flyers. We're both in agreement that the Rangers will finish with the most points of all of those teams.
And so what was Carolina's?
Carolina 95.5, and the Rangers exact same 95.5.
Yeah, so kind of betting with those. Like, do you think they'll make the playoffs? It's kind of like the over under ish on what that one is. So
yeah, that division is going to be a dogfight all season long. It looks like. Any final thoughts on this division before we move on to the Western Conference?
Not really. One thing that I could kind of see is as far as betting goes, like how I was saying before with Ottawa, how like based on their point total, I can't see them being really bad. I could see that with Columbus. Like I could see Columbus being like historically bad. Just like I'm a believer in like the mood of an organization, and I just feel like right now Columbus is a dud. So I could just totally see like that negativity ripping through the locker room, games they've lost before the puck's been dropped. And I could see that season getting out of hand. So that's one I think I'd go the under.
Yeah, that team just seems like a mess right now. It just seems like no one wants to play for the Columbus Blue
It's just
Jackets.
negativity. Like, yeah, it's just so much negativity around all the time.
And even like the Patrick Laine situation, like he just seems like so unhappy.
Weird. It's so weird. Yeah. Like
it's just bizarre. It's like just such a brutal fit for him. And like I know Tortorella's gone now, but I don't know. Like that just, I got some really bad vibes about that Columbus team. Like I'm with you there, Lepore. Like I think that team could be very, very bad.
Yeah, I see them being bad. Yeah. So.
Especially in that division. Like I don't think there's any way this team like doesn't finish last in the Metro division.
Yeah, that's pretty safe bet. I would agree with you, I'd say.
All right, man. Let's move on to the Western Conference.
For sure.
And we'll start things off in the Central Division. And leading the way, of course,
is the Arizona
Arizona Coyotes. Future home of Austin Matthews, perhaps.
Oh, here we go.
A lot of the people love to tell us.
Oh my God, yeah.
But no, it's definitely not the Arizona Coyotes. It is, of course, the Colorado Avalanche, who won the President's Trophy last season. DraftKings Sportsbook has them winning the President's Trophy again this season, just based on the over-under. They are projected to finish with 110.5 points. And that obviously leads the division by a large margin. Like there is a 13-point gap between the Colorado Avalanche and the Minnesota Wild, who are number 2 in team total points at 97.5. Okay. And you have the Dallas Stars, 95.5, St. Louis, 94.5, the Winnipeg Jets, 92.5. And then the Chicago Blackhawks, who a lot of people this offseason have been saying that they're back and they got Seth Jones and Jonathan Taves is coming back. But according to DraftKings Sportsbook, they have them finishing as the 3rd worst team in the Central Division. Again, this is just based on the over-under point totals. They're projected for 91.5 points. And then at the bottom of the division, you got the Nashville Predators, 84.5, and then the Arizona Coyotes, who have a 69.5 point total, and that is the 2nd worst point total in the NHL, just ahead of the Buffalo Sabres. So, Lepore, what is your initial take on the Central Division?
I think the Central has ones that can be way off. Like that. That's the one that jumps out at me. And even again, back to the Dom Lucian model, like he agrees. He had. So Colorado was what, 110. He has Colorado. He's Colorado at 121.
Wow.
Like an 11 point thing, 11 point difference. And as I was saying earlier, but like, what can you see happen at 110 points flat? If someone said, what's more likely, Colorado gets 100 points or 120? I'd be like, I think 120 is more likely that things go really good for them rather than like 100 points in that division, in that conference for Colorado is like a bad season. Like it'd be a totally like passive season.
So I assume he has Colorado winning the President's Trophy.
Oh, easily. Right? Yeah.
Based
easily.
on that 120 point projection.
Yeah. He's got Tampa at 112 was second, and then Vegas 107, and then Toronto at 108, and then Vegas at 107.
Okay.
Yeah. Other ones, I think Winnipeg, he had Winnipeg at what? 90.
He had Winnipeg at, let me just pull it up real quick, at 92.5.
I go over on that one. Like I like the Jets, like they dealt with a lot last year. Again, that division, I think I'd go over with that one. Like I think it's more likely that the Jets fight for / make the playoffs than like aren't close. And again, like you really have to look at the divisions. Like they're going to be playing Nashville, Arizona, and then even within the conference, like those Western teams. So like I would go over on the Jets. I think he had Mini about where I would put them. Like they're going to me, that one's a coin flip. Like I can't see Minnesota being like a really good team, like easily at 100, or a really bad team either. And by bad, I mean like easily missing the playoffs. What do you have Dallas at? 95?
95.5. So yeah, so DraftKings has them finishing essentially third in the Central Division.
Dom has them at 89.
89, eh?
That's a big yeah, he's low on Dallas. And like, I mean,
because I like Dallas. I even talked about
you do like Dallas. Yeah.
Like I think that's like a low key, like good Stanley Cup bet. I think they're like 25-1.
Okay, there you go.
I like that roster. I mean, I don't think they're gonna win the Stanley Cup, but if you're looking for some value, it's not bad.
Yeah, that one's like, the thing is, Dallas is always weird. If I feel like Dallas always has like a big story, like a big injury, or like they had like that year they had the terrible star. Like there's always a lot of drama in Dallas, so maybe that's why the numbers are a little off. With Arizona, like as one of those like basement feeder teams, like what do you see on that one? That like it's so low, it's you got to bet over, or like no, this team can be really bad.
Yeah, you know what, man? I think I would take the under on that 69.5. Like that team sucks.
I don't even know who they have now.
Like they're just man, they basically just took all of those Vancouver contracts.
Yeah, that's right.
Jay Beagle and Antoine Roussel. I mean, they got Jacob Chikrin, who emerged as one of the best defensemen in the NHL last season. Like he was awesome. But man, I'm just looking at their forward core right now. I mean, I still like Clayton Keller, but he has disappointed after signing his contract. I think he signed a $7 million contract.
Remember when he came in the league? Like the highlight reels he was putting up, how excited everyone was for this kid.
Oh man, yeah, he came in like looking fantastic, and I think he also set some records like in the U.S. Development program.
I think you're right.
Like they were comparing him to Matthews just in terms of like how much he tore up the U.S. Development program. But yeah, he signed a contract for over $7 million, and we talked about contracts on the last show, and I think Dom had that as like a really, I don't think it was like a very bad contract, but he definitely had it in the negative. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Clayton Keller, 8 years, $57.2 million. So yeah, he's a guy like if he could take, the next step and emerge as the player that a lot of people thought he would become, maybe they're not going to be terrible. But yeah, like Phil Kessel, Nick Schmaltz, Christian Dvorak is a pretty good player. But after that, okay, Barrett Hayton, who they also drafted pretty high, but you just go down this roster, it's just not good.
Yeah.
Just not very good. Then they also lost, they lost both of their goalies. Anthony Emmy's in Carolina. Darcy Kemper's now on the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, Kemper. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, this team sucks. I think I'm going to take the under on this team.
Yeah. I heard Dvorak, story I tell. I made a point to go see the London Knights when they were in town during Marner's last year there. And their top line was Marner, Kachuk, and Dvorak.
That is disgusting.
In the OHL. So you had like 2 high picks, and then like Dvorak, I think, was a second round pick. And I'm saying this with all seriousness. This is in no way an exaggeration. They were playing, the 3 of them, when they were on the ice, were playing pickup hockey. Like they were just like passing it around, like in front of the net. You score, no, you score, empty net, like barred out. Like it was actually hilarious how much better those three were than everybody else. But so I've always kind of kept my eye on Dvorak, like from remembering that game and how dominant that line was.
Yeah, that must have been cool to watch live because I remember like watching highlights of that London Knights team because they would show like Marner, right? Because he was like one of the top picks in the draft. And yeah, I feel like all those guys had like 120 points that season with the London Knights. Like,
yeah, that team was pretty well like unbeatable. And even I remember watching like again, like you're watching a prospect, your favorite team, like how excited I was for Marner. Like he was like playing the point on the power play, just like doing whatever he wanted.
Doing whatever the hell he wanted.
Yeah, I'll go sideboards now. It was just hilarious. Like again, how good they were. Phil Kessel, though, man. I mean, our boy Phil, one more year of Phil. For Leafs fans out there, I believe this is the last year of the Phil Kessel contract.
That he's on the books?
Yeah, that $1.2 million for the.
I think you're right. I should go double check that on Cap Friendly, but I think
exciting. The Leafs are going to free up some cap space.
Yeah, it's the last year, $1.2 million of retained salary for Phil the Thrill.
Why'd they do that? I always wondered, like, what was the negotiation in that like, hey, you have to take 1.2 million, and maybe that got them Kapanen or something. There was no, okay, we'll give you Kapanen if you do this, but I don't know. I found it's kind of like a weird random thing, like to keep 1.2 million of his $8 million.
Yeah, especially because he was really good.
Yeah, like he's like a 35 goal scorer every year.
Like, holy crap, man. He won 2 Stanley Cups. Like, so anyway.
Is Phil Kessel a Hall of Famer?
Oh, we can do a whole podcast on that.
Because people throw it. I don't really like, my first answer would be no, but I've heard people throw it out there. I think Friedman threw it out there like he should be in the Hall of Fame. Like his goal rate, his consistency. I mean, people joke a lot about Phil's fitness, but like he's always healthy. Like I remember with the Leafs, it was like, look at his stats, like 80 games, 82 games.
He's like one of the best Iron Men of basically like this entire generation.
Yeah, so the hot dogs are working, everyone. I mean, contrary to popular belief.
For real, make fun of his diet and, the way that he looks all you want, but this dude is always available for his team and he scores a ton of goals and he's won a couple of championships. So, you know what? When you break down that dude's career, he is sort of a borderline Hall of Famer.
A lot of people think too, man, and the guy said before how much I love Sid. A lot of people think Kessel was robbed of that Conn Smythe
one of those years.
That was the first year where like he had more goals than Sid, and I think a lot of like timely goals. And they just kind of gave it to Sid because it's Sid.
Yeah, because it's Sid.
Yeah, kind of like the Washington year. It's like, well, Ovechkin's going to get it.
Exactly. It's almost like when anytime like LeBron wins the NBA championship. I mean, LeBron's like insane. Yeah. But it's like, okay, we're just going to give it to LeBron. We're just going to give it to the best player on the team that won the title, even if their numbers are not the best, right?
Yeah. Well, there was
how it works sometimes in sports. Same thing with Tom Brady. He always wins Super Bowl
Bruno,
MVP.
don't do it to me, Bruno. The MVP. Oh my God. What was it? I'm gonna throw it. Was it 147 yards passing in his first Super Bowl, 1 touchdown pass? They gave him the MVP after his defense stopped the greatest show on turf, one of the best offensive teams ever. Last year, his defense held Patrick Mahomes to 9 points, but they give Brady the MVP. Oh my God. Don't get me started on Tom Brady. Against Seattle, he threw 2 interceptions. They gave him the MVP. You ruined my Sunday, Bruno.
I had to bring up Tom Brady, man. Yeah. Every time I bring up Tom Brady, Lepore
is 0 to 100.
The fire just starts burning inside him, and it is the greatest thing ever when you mention Tom Brady in front of Michael Brady.
One day I'll meet Tom. And so,
I need a selfie, Lepore. I just want to go on Instagram one day and just see a picture of you and Tom Brady.
Oh man,
just 2 of the best looking dudes out there.
Oh, thanks,
nice selfie.
But you know what's hilarious too with the whole Tom Brady thing? Like, I'm funny. I mentioned earlier in the show that I'm a big Notre Dame fan. Of all schools, he had to go to Michigan. Like that extra thing, like reason to hate him. Like he was the quarterback at Michigan. Like one of Notre Dame's biggest historical rivals. But let's talk about something else, Bruno. Like you're ruining my Sunday here.
All right, no more Tom Brady talk, Lepore. We'll save it for the next podcast.
Yeah, but just we'll do something DraftKings do with NFL. I'm sure we can do that show too. Over-unders in the NFL.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna start like a different podcast for every sport eventually.
Why not?
All right. So yeah, like circling back here to the Central Division at the top, like the Colorado Avalanche. So you said Dom has them finishing with 120.
121, yeah.
DraftKings has their over-under at 110.5. Like, I think Colorado's going to win the President's Trophy again. I think they're going to go back-to-back. I think they're going to be pissed off about how last season ended against Vegas, losing in the second round. That team is still stacked across the board. So Yeah, I would definitely take the over on the Colorado Avalanche. I don't want to call that free money or a lock or anything like that, but man, that Avalanche team is insane. And
Yeah.
I think it's basically between them and probably Vegas for the President's Trophy. And I say Vegas, just we'll get to the Pacific Division in a second, just because that division just isn't very good at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not a surprise. And then yeah, Minnesota at 97.5. Like they took a nice step last season. They're still dealing with this Kirill Kaprizov situation. Like, is he potentially might go back to the KHL? Like, I don't think that's been settled yet.
Yeah, I think it came out that one team didn't want him, or there was some sort of disagreement, like just to put a nail in the coffin. But I mean, yeah, we'll get something confirmed in the next little while.
It seems like the Wild are gonna get that done, and he will sign a long-term contract, but we'll see how that plays out. And then, yeah, I mean, the Winnipeg Jets at 92.5. That's kind of, I think that's like a perfect number for that team. Yeah, I would probably go slight over on that
On the Jets, yeah.
as well with the Winnipeg Jets. I think like their offense and Connor Hellebuck should carry them to a playoff spot. Like I don't think the Jets are gonna finish in the top 3 in that division, but I do think they will get into the playoffs as a wild card team.
Okay.
That's kind of my thoughts on the Jets. But
so the top 3 in the division, you'd have Colorado, the Blues, and Minnesota.
No, I got the Stars. So I think I actually think it's going to go exactly. Oh, you know what though? The Blues, man, that's a good team too.
Yeah, like Dom has the Blues at 100 points.
I like the Blues as well. But I'm big on this Stars team too, Lepore. Like I think honestly, I think we could see all 5 of those teams make the playoffs just based on how terrible the Pacific Division is.
That's a good call. Yeah.
And then you have the Blackhawks though, right? Like we talked about, like everyone's like pumping the tires of the Chicago Blackhawks. You know, I even talked about Michael Trakos. I think he still writes for Post Media. He was like, "Oh, they're with the Tampa Bay Lightning and Vegas Golden Knights as like one of the best teams in the NHL heading into next season." It's like, can we pump the brakes on that team? Yeah. What are your thoughts actually on Chicago? Like, do you think they're right where they should be? Like, where does Dom have Chicago?
93 points.
93 points.
And that they were at 93.5 or something.
Yeah, DraftKings has them at 91.5.
Okay, 91.5. I don't know. I think I might go again, like what's more likely, like in the way of like a 5 or 10 point up or a 5 or 10 point down. Like, I think I'd have to go down. I think I'd have to go the under, because I can't see Chicago pushing for like 100 points, but then I could see the opposite where they're like in the low 80s. So like a 500 team, a little better than 500 teams. Yeah, I'd have to go under on Chicago, I think.
Yeah, that's a team where I got to see it because,
yeah,
like I get it. Like Taves is coming back and Seth Jones is in the mix now. But like Seth Jones, we've talked about his contract. Like that's like one of the worst contracts in the NHL at this point. And maybe Seth Jones proves everybody wrong and has a nice bounce back season. But that team, I look at their defense core, it's just not good. Like, yeah, I'm not sold on that Blackhawks team. Like, I think they're probably going to finish with under 90 points. That might be a little bit of a hot take, but yeah, I actually think they're probably going to miss the playoffs, the Chicago Blackhawks. But Lepore, any other final thoughts on this Central Division before we move on?
Not really. I mean, Arizona really bad, Colorado really good. Minus Nashville, you got kind of a cluster in the middle, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's perfectly said, man. Let's move on now to the Pacific Division. And again, I was kind of like giving names to all these divisions just based on, you know, what I saw on the point totals. And I said worst division when I was organizing the Pacific Division based on their point total over under. So you have the Vegas Golden Knights leading the way at 106.5 points. And then there is a 9-point drop off to the Edmonton Oilers, who are at 97.5. But DraftKings has the Oilers tied with Minnesota for the 3rd highest point total in the Western Conference. So when you just compare the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, like Vegas is just a lot. And Vegas, I mean like the sports books are a lot lower on the Western Conference. And we've seen that over the last number of seasons where the Eastern Conference has now taken the mantle as the better conference. Because remember when the California teams were dominating every
Chicago,
year,
yeah,
and Chicago,
Dallas, yeah.
right? We all viewed the Western Conference as, the best,
The
right?
bigger, heavier conference is always
Exactly. The more
thought,
physical. Yeah, exactly. The more like playoff ready conference where all these teams can do damage. But yeah, now it's definitely switched to the other side with the East. But yeah, so then you got the Oilers at number 2, and then big surprise, the Seattle Kraken. DraftKings Sportsbook has them at 92.5 points, finishing with the third highest point total of any team in the Pacific Division.
You want to hear it, Bruno? Dom has Seattle at 99 points. 99.
Oh my goodness.
And of course, it's because of the division, but he has him at 99 points. Slam dunk over for him.
Wow. Holy. Like, I don't know if wow. So he's smashing the over then on the Seattle Kraken.
Big time.
Based on what we're seeing in the market. And
Seattle's tough because it'll be interesting to see like how they approach their season. Like if their lineup stays put or they make some deals and
especially with all the cap space they have. But yeah, so those are the top 3 teams. And then there's 2 Canadian teams back to back. So the next we have the Flames at 90.5, Vancouver 88.5. DraftKings Sportsbook not very high on the Flames and Canucks. And then the 3 California teams, who I said used to be the creme de la creme of the NHL.
Remember the Western road trip that everybody feared all the time? Those 3 games in 4 days.
The daunting California road trip where if you could win one of those games, it would be an accomplishment. But yeah, now it's like if you don't sweep the California road trip, then you kind of suck at this point. But yeah, Kings 85.5, Sharks 83.5, and the Ducks, they're going to be awful this year, 70.5 points. So yeah, Lepore, give me your take on this Pacific Division.
Okay. One that jumps out to me, and usually when point totals are this high, this wouldn't be the case, but Vegas jumps out to me. Like I'd go hard over on Vegas. I think they might win. I think they might win the President's Trophy because I think that division is so weak and they're a really good team. And the style they play too, like they'll just outplay like those weaker teams. So I'd go hard over on Vegas. And I'm going to make some fans here actually on Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver. I will go over on all 3 of those. Edmonton, again, it's a weak division. I mean, they did add Hyman, and as much as we think that deal won't look good in a few years, I mean, they got 2021 Zach Hyman. Question their D, but again, just because of the division and because that team has Draisaitl and McDavid, I could see them having a really good season. And because there's been a lot of change, there could be some excitement. So I'd go over on them. Vancouver's a tough one because that team dealt with we don't know shit about the Vancouver Canucks. Like based on what they dealt with last year, like COVID ripping through the team, not having their best player in Pettersson. They did make that one big deal, but like I think Vancouver will have like a decent season. Like I think Vancouver will fight for a playoff spot. Actually, like I think they will get into a point where it gets interesting at the end. And Calgary, what do you have Calgary at? Like 90.5?
Yeah, DraftKings has them exactly at 90.5 points, is the 4th highest point total in the division.
Yeah. So like as far as Calgary goes, I put them in that same boat of Vancouver in the way that like I think they'll fight for a playoff spot. Like I think they'll be there to the end. They have talent. And I mean, there's rumors of a lot of unhappy players on that team. So maybe we get some movement, but I mean, you can't predict that. So yeah, man, I'll go over on Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver, all 3.
I love it, man. I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. Like I would go over on the Knights as well, because I think they're going to be fighting with Colorado for the President's Trophy. And I believe you play each team in your division 4 times, like going back to this.
I think it's weird. I think have they changed? I think it's, don't they go like summer 4, summer 5, and then it switches the next year or something that you play other teams 5 and other teams 4.
I don't think it's the exact, you don't play every team the exact same amount of times, but I think you play every team at least 4 times, I want to say.
Yeah, maybe now because there's 32 teams, it's different because they can actually do it properly, but yeah.
Exactly. So just based on that, like with the Pacific Division, appearing to be the worst division, it seems like Vegas is going to rack up a ton of points. And I think they're probably going to finish. Like, I think there's a higher likelihood they finish in like the 110 point range than they do in like, the 100, 105.
100. Yeah, exactly.
So I got Vegas definitely smashing the over on them. And you know what? I like your overcall on these Canadian teams as well. Like, I think Edmonton will probably finish as the 2 seed. I know, Dom, for example, from The Athletic has the Kraken finishing with 99 points. Like, holy cow.
He has Calgary at 99 points too.
And Calgary at 99 as well, eh?
Yeah, and Edmonton, Vancouver at 96.
Wow. Okay. So he has Edmonton and Vancouver as like 4th and 5th in that division.
Yeah.
Interesting. But yeah, I think the McDavid and Draisaitl factor, like, yeah, I'm probably taking the over on Edmonton. And again, like, I'm not smashing the over on them, but I see them finishing with like between like 98 and 102 points.
Yeah.
That's totally kind of where I see Edmonton. Seattle, you know what, man? I'd probably take the under.
I think I would too.
On the 92.5.
Again, what's more likely? So they're 91 and a half,
92 and a half.
Like, what's more likely, 102 and a half? Like, sorry, 102 and a half, no, 102 or 82?
Yeah, you're right, 80. Man.
That's how I would look at it. Like, they're not going to be an amazing team, but they could also be like a 500 or a bad team. So I think that's a hard under. I think maybe, again, how Vegas tries to get in people's brains, the whole thing that happened with the Knights. So they're thinking like people will think Vegas is going to do really well, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, no. I think the smart money's on the under there.
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, I think people do have Vegas in their heads, like, first year of existence, that team gets to the Stanley Cup final, they finish with over 100 points. And with this Kraken roster, like we've talked about it, it's a solid roster.
Yeah, it's
like
nice.
It's not bad by any means. Like, it's not bad, like, for example, like Buffalo or Columbus or something like that, right? But yeah, to finish, I think I have them in the 80s somewhere. So I'm definitely going to take the under on the Kraken. And then, yeah, looking at the Flames and Canucks, like I talked about this last season, specifically with the Canucks. Like, I thought they were going to make the playoffs in the North Division. Yeah, and I know they dealt with a lot of shit. Pettersson was injured most of the season. They had the COVID situation. There was a lot of things going on with that Canucks team. But when I look at that team on paper and I look at the talent that they have, and then you got Thatcher Demko, who's continuing to get better in net, I'm definitely taking the over. 88.5 on the Canucks. Give me that over all day. And again, it doesn't mean that they're going to make the playoffs, but I think there's a higher likelihood that the Canucks finish with, in the low 90s as opposed to finishing, let's say, in the mid 80s. So I'm definitely taking the over on them. And then, yeah, Daryl Sutter and the Calgary Flames.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that, you know what? I think that 90.5 is pretty spot on. And I know Dom has them at, would you say 99?
99.
The Calgary Flames. Man, that one is tough because, that's another roster when I go through it. Like, I like the talent on that team. I think it's just going to come down to like how everything goes with Daryl Sutter in year 2 and how some of the players respond to him. And, we all know Daryl Sutter loves playing that tight defensive structure. Like, will they buy in? Do you see this Flames team buying into that? I think that's the big question. And if you think they do, then you definitely smash the over on that. And if you think they aren't going to buy into Daryl Sutter, then I think you smash the under on that 90.5. But yeah, you know what, Lepore, I think I'm with you as well. I think I think it's a slight over for me on that Calgary 90.5.
One that actually, the Kings jump out to me at 85.5. I think I'd go over on that. Like, I think they've gone through a lot of changes. Hopefully Byfield can have some impact this year. They added Deneau. The Kings are kind of lurking, man. Like, I don't think they're like a good team.
You just see them taking the next step.
Yeah, or again, 85.5. I think it's more likely they end up in the 90s than in like the 70s. Like, I don't think they're going to be a bad team, especially in that division. So like the Kings jump out at me. Like, I'd go over on that one.
Yeah, that's fair. You know what? That's another number that I think is like pretty spot on. The 84, or sorry, was it 84 and a half? 85 and a half. I think that's like pretty spot on. They picked up Victor Arvidsson in the offseason. They signed Philip Deneau. Yeah, man. When you go through their roster, like it's a decent roster. I think that's right. It's really close for me. You know what? I'm going to take the under on that.
Nice.
On the
we're
LA
writing
Kings.
we're writing these down, right? Or we're gonna make fun of ourselves the last week of the season.
Someone's writing them down.
Oh, someone's
ready
someone's
to
writing
in the
them down,
comment section.
ready to. Every team we've picked the under, there's a fan somewhere writing it down to remind themselves to fire back at us if we were wrong.
Yeah, there's a fan from every fan base that is probably really pissed off with some of the things that we've said about their teams.
Yeah.
Even if we've said some good things too.
Yeah, they weren't good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Just not good enough. But yeah, I'm going to take the slight under on the Kings. And then, yeah, I think like the Sharks, I think the Ducks are just awful.
Yeah.
Like at least the Sharks, like they're another team we've talked about where it's like they have like really good players on their roster. So like it wouldn't surprise anyone if they have like a solid season. But yeah, that's another team. I don't even think I'm going to like touch a bet on San Jose at 83. Now I'd probably take the under on them. But again, I would not be surprised if they like somehow, it's like halfway through the season and it's like, oh my God, like the Sharks are third in the Pacific Division.
Yeah.
Look at this resurgence, right? So
I think I would take the over on San Jose.
You would?
Yeah. Again, like you said, there's talent. It's worth a shot. Like things can go right. They've had some really bad years. Like, let's do it. I think I could see the over. Anaheim.
Yeah.
Are they that bad?
Sucks.
Like,
I'm
bad?
taking the under on that team.
What's the total again?
70 and a half. And that's really low.
That's low.
But like, I think they're in play for the number one pick.
Yeah, that's true. That's one, like that's about where I see it would be. Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. I think I would go under. Like I think you're gonna see in this division a lot more than maybe people think. It's gonna be like a big gap. Like in teams, like if people do beat it, or it could be anyway, if people just beat up on the California teams and kind of similar to what you had in some of the divisions last year where there was no real balance. But it's gonna be like everyone's guess is in the air as far as that division goes after Vegas. Like at the end of the day, there's not too many teams in this. Like even seriously, like if someone told you in this division San Jose was going to come fourth, like would you be shocked?
No, not at all.
I wouldn't be shocked either. It'd be surprising, but not like, oh my God, how did that happen? Like the only team really would be, and like even LA, like I said, they've gone through a lot of changes. Byfield being in the lineup now. Like the only team would be Anaheim. Like every other team. I guess what we're saying is we don't think anyone is that good. So it's kind of, except for Vegas. So it's up for grabs.
Yeah, exactly. Anaheim is for sure the only team. Like that would be the biggest shock factor if they somehow found a way to like be in the mix for a playoff spot. That would be insane. But yeah, looking at all those other teams, like it could really go either way. Because even like, I mentioned about Daryl Sutter and the Flames. Like that's a situation where it could end up really good or it could end up really bad. And then even with Vancouver, right? A lot of people are still saying like, the Oliver Ekman-Larsson contract sucks and he's like a replacement level player now. And, how is Pettersson going to keep developing? And I think Pettersson's awesome, but who knows, right? With those Canadian teams. But it's like you said, Lepore, it's like you got Vegas, who I think is a stone lock to finish number one. And then, another big question mark with Seattle. What are they going to do in their first season? And then you have Edmonton, who I think we both agree is probably going to finish as the 2 seed in that division. So yeah, all in all, that division is, I'm very confident in saying it is the worst division in the NHL, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, man.
All right, Lepore, let's move on now to what we teased earlier in the show.
Yeah.
It is the offer sheet, the big bad offer sheet that all of these teams in the NHL are just terrified of handing out to players. And it was the Carolina Hurricanes who decided to say, screw it. We are going to sign Jesperi Kotkaniemi to an offer sheet.
What a bunch of jerks.
A couple of years ago, in July 2019, the Montreal Canadiens tendered an offer sheet to Carolina's number one center, Sebastian Aho. It was a 5-year offer sheet for just over $42 million. And that sent shockwaves throughout the NHL because I believe that was the first offer sheet we had seen in like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it had been a while. Yeah.
And now 2 years later, the Carolina Hurricanes getting their revenge. And honestly, if you haven't checked out the Canes Twitter account, just go do it right now. Continue listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube, but open up that Canes Twitter account because it is absolute perfection. The level of trolling by this Carolina Hurricanes social media team is honestly one of the greatest things I think I've ever seen in the social media era. Like, first of all, okay, just to break down this offer sheet, they gave Jesperi Kotkaniemi a $20 signing bonus. Yes, you heard me correctly. A $20 signing bonus. And of course, that is the jersey number of Sebastian Aho. He is number 20. So that is the first troll. And then as we keep going, they actually sent out an announcement written in French. The Carolina Hurricanes sent out an announcement on Twitter written in French. And if you translate the announcement, it actually translates to, we gave Jesperi Kotkaniemi a hostile offer. A hostile offer. Now, for those of you who know French, maybe go double check that. I just ran that through Google Translate, but other people were confirming this as well. They called it a hostile offer. Then they also tweeted out an Uno reverse card, going back to the whole situation, how they're now doing it to themselves, right? How it was the Habs who did the offer sheet for Aho, and now things are coming back to bite them in the ass. How Carolina is giving Kotkaniemi the offer sheet. So, like, Lepore, man, the level of trolling on this was just next level. And
Incredible.
And also, shout out to Frank Saravalli, who now writes for Daily Faceoff. He pointed out, if you look at what Mark Bergevin said about the Aho offer sheet 2 years ago, go look at Don Waddell, the GM of the Carolina Hurricanes, his comments on the Kotkaniemi offer sheet. They are literally almost word for word.
Amazing.
So they were trolling them. So it was such a detailed troll that they had Don Waddell essentially say the exact same thing or write the exact same statement as Mark Bergevin wrote 2 years ago. It was unbelievable. So Lepore, saying all that, I got to hear your take on this offer sheet for Kotkaniemi.
Okay. So we constantly say on this podcast, and I think hockey fans in general, a big problem we have with our sport, this sport that we love so much, is that it's boring. Very rarely do we get entertained by things that happen off the ice. Like there's very little drama in the NHL, or, people chirping these guys after games. They always say the same thing. There's never a hot take by anyone. So I am not kidding when I say that this whole process that Carolina put together of the offer sheet, the signing bonus, and the tweets, as far as hockey goes, is the funniest thing I've ever seen. I've seen as a hockey fan. Like, it reeks of like entertainment and personality. And I got to say too, man, honestly, like, we call our podcast the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast because we're Leafs fans and we can make fun of ourselves. We know that we're pathetic, like as a fan base and as an organization, we're fully aware of our lack of success and what we sign ourselves up for. So please, Montreal Canadiens fans, have a sense of humor with this. Like, try your best just to have a sense of humor with this. And to me, it's so unhockey. And that's why I love it so much. And what I love about it is people, every summer, you always hear about like offer sheets, like who's going to get an offer sheet. What are the possibilities for offer sheets? You hear rumblings from Dreger. Oh, this team's getting ready for an offer sheet. Now we've been slapped with in the face. This is why teams don't do it, because you're going to get it back. And it's like, why? I think what people forget about the offer sheet too, is that you're giving something up. Like, I remember, and we'll talk, bring it back to the Leafs, like when all those rumors about like Nylander, and then it was Marner, like, oh, there's going to be an offer sheet for this amount. A team's got to give up that salary and 4 first rounders for like the superstar players. Like, you're in that threshold. So that's why it's like there's that reserve on it. And I remember like with the Marner thing, I'm like, if a team's going to give us 4 first round picks, then we get that free cap space. I'm like, that's a lot. Like, people, I'm sure there's Leaf fans out there who would say right now that's a win. That if the Leafs could get 4 first round picks for Marner today, they should do it.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that's my opinion. I'm saying that opinion, I'm sure, exists. So again, it's why teams don't do it. As far as the number goes, the number's insane. Like, this all being said of how I love what Carolina did. I was entertained by it. I found it hilarious. I don't think Montreal should match it. I think Montreal should say take him at that amount, and we'll take it's like what, a first and a third.
Yeah. So the compensation, they have a week to decide whether they're going to match the offer, and the compensation is a first and third round pick in the 2022 draft.
It's a good draft. It's a good draft, they say too. So and it's not protected. So yeah, man, I think if you're like 6 million, like Kotkaniemi, like someone was posting stats about his numbers. I think the big one was assists.
Yeah.
171 NHL games. He's got 40 assists.
It's brutal.
And you're going to pay him $6 million.
And I get that he was a top 3 pick in the draft, and the Habs thought that they were, drafting their number 1 center of the future. And I know they got Nick Suzuki as well, but they're thinking, we got Suzuki, we got Kotkaniemi, but man, Lepore, you said it, $6.1 million. That's a lot for Jesperi Kotkaniemi.
And it's 1 year. So he's going into that RFA. You got to do it all over again. So who knows, right?
Right now, if I was the Habs, honestly, as good as some of the moments he had in the playoffs this past season, scoring that overtime winner against the Leafs. And I know there were moments where the Habs made him a healthy scratch during this playoff run. And I'm sure maybe that played into his decision to actually sign the offer sheet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like if I'm Montreal right now, I think I'm taking the draft pick compensation. I really think I am, especially at that number. It's like Carolina picked like the perfect number to screw them over.
You think?
At 6.1 million, because going back to the Aho offer sheet, how everyone was like, okay, they signed Aho to this offer sheet, but it was like a good contract.
Yeah, they were going to match it. Yeah.
Right? It's like they'd be crazy to not match this contract. Like Aho is like one of the best up and coming young players in the league. It's under, a shade under 8.5 million. Whereas with this, like it's clearly an overpay for Kotkaniemi, even though it's 1 year. So if I'm the Habs right now, man, I think I'm taking that draft pick compensation. I really do.
Yeah. What I find, and again, it's going to be so entertaining. Let's remind ourselves of who we're dealing with in this situation. It's Marc Bergevin. And that's a big ego. That's a big personality. So who knows like what's going through his head right now. But you thought it was the perfect number. Like what number would you?
In terms of like to screw over Montreal. And it's
they just kind of lose them and they get the pick. Yeah. But like, what would you, but then if you're Carolina though, too, it's like, but now he's yours at 6.1 million. Like, so
that's true.
Like you mentioned Aho at 8.5, like what would have been the number to you that like Montreal is going to match that? Like what's the highest number that Montreal was like, okay, yeah, no, we'll do that.
I think something like in the low 5s.
Yeah.
I think maybe they match like no problem. But again, like that wouldn't be enough, right? To be like, okay, if we legitimately want to steal this player, quote unquote,
yeah,
we have to offer something that's a little bit outrageous here.
Yeah. I think Montreal would have.
I think Montreal
would have done that for like 5.1. Like Montreal, I think would be like, yeah, no, we'll do it just to like avoid all this. But
yeah, 100%. But this makes them really think about it, right? Because again, this is a guy who early in his NHL career, he's had struggles. There was a point where he was demoted to the Laval Rocket of the AHL. Like it has not been smooth sailing for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, despite coming into the league with all this pedigree, being, a top 3 pick in the draft, being, what everyone thought was going to turn into, a lot of people like comparing him to Barkov, like when he first came out of the draft, right? These big, like Finnish centermen, 6'2", can skate and has skill, but, just earth to everyone, like he is not Alexander Barkov, and he's nothing close to Alexander Barkov. And I don't think in the future he's going to be anything as good as Alexander Barkov. But I don't know. He's still only 21 years old, and maybe Carolina is a lot higher than him, a lot higher on him than, a lot of other people around the NHL seem to be. So yeah, man, I don't know. Maybe like you said, maybe Carolina's shooting themselves in the foot here.
It could happen. Well, like we agree, say like at 5 million, at around 5 million, Montreal would do it.
Yeah.
So then I say at $1 million more at the 6 million as a GM, again, this is where the ego comes into play too. Will you take on that, say that $1 million that you don't want on your cap to avoid like the embarrassment, or like it's like, I'll deal with that just to like avoid the drama of everyone pointing at us and laughing at us if we lost the player. Like
that makes a lot of sense. And just thinking about Marc Bergevin, it seems like it almost seems like he's going to match and then like deal with the other shit afterwards. Where he's like, where he might just be like, all right, screw this. Like, I still like Kotkaniemi. I still have plans where this guy is, our number 2 center behind Nick Suzuki moving into the future. Let's match the offer sheet and then deal with the cap implications and all the other crap afterwards and figure out how to make this all work.
Yeah. It's been a fun summer for Montreal, man. It's been a fun summer. Okay. So we have 6 days until this thing is done. The briefcase of $1 million. You get it. If you get the question right, does Montreal match?
Oh my goodness. You know what?
Tough, eh?
So I think, like I said, I don't think Montreal should, but I think they're going to.
Okay.
I think they're going to match Lepore. How about you?
See, as much as I think Bergevin's like emotional, doesn't want to get pushed around. I think he's pretty black and white too. Like, I think he might just take it. Like, I'm on the fence. I think I go slight no. Like, I think we see some fireworks. I'm going slight no on that one. The Montreal doesn't take it.
Yeah, it's
I hope they do. I hope they do, because it'll just be like, again, the talk of it, the money, then all the pressure on this kid because he's making that kind of money, and then the pressure on Bergevin because people will be pointing at him. If this kid's not playing well, you could have got compensation for this kid and gotten him off the book. So that's why I hope it does happen. But yeah, I think after some calming down, maybe some talks with Jeff Molson, like Bergevin will kind of lean towards, let's just move on, put our heads in the mud, and like let this thing go.
Yeah, I'm just so happy that this happened.
It's amazing
because we reached a point in this offseason, and I know, the season went, pretty deep into the summer just based on how the schedule lined up this year. But man, like, we were getting to a point where nothing was happening in the NHL. Like,
yeah,
I think hockey fans were just dying for some entertainment, for some trade or anything to happen. And you know what? This offer sheet, I think, came at the perfect time.
The most dramatic thing maybe in the sport, like a fucking offer sheet. It's amazing.
It's awesome. And I cannot wait to see what the Montreal Canadiens decide to do here. I don't know how long they're going to take to decide. Like we said, they have 7 days, and at this point, they have 6 days left to make their decision. But man, I cannot wait to see what the Habs decide to do here.
Books will be written. It's going to be awesome.
All right, Lepore, any final thoughts before we wrap up episode 33?
No, I just can't wait until the next show now, so we can talk about whether or not Montreal has accepted or denied that contract.
Same. It's like, This is exactly what we needed. This is what the GFP podcast needed. If we're not going to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs, then you better believe that we're going to be fired up to talk about the Montreal Canadiens.
Les habitants.
Oh, just that they're secretly like our second favorite team. Maybe. I know you like your Ottawa Senators, but there's
my Ottawa Senators.
There's like this dark, twisted thing inside the head of Anthony Bruno that just like loves talking about the Montreal Canadiens.
I will say about Montreal, and this is coming from the biggest Leafs fan in the world. I've always said I'd love to play in Montreal. Like, I've been to their building. Like, I love the city. Like, how they treat their players. People talk about pressure or whatever, the language. Like, I wouldn't care, man. Like, I just think to be part of that as a player would be so amazing. So I've always been quick to say, like, sometimes I take shots at Montreal and laugh at things like this. I'd love to play for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, well said, Lepore. Like, when you just think about that building, that organization, the history, it's got to be just an absolute dream to play for that team. Really. I mean, when we say that, like, in all seriousness,
the way I always look at it, and now we're getting like cheesy, is like, if I was a player in that city, that thing of like when you walk into a bar or like you walk into a restaurant, like the buzz, like you're in a bar or you're at a restaurant in downtown Montreal, and there's a lot of great ones, and Shea Weber walks in, there's an immediate like everyone's turning their head.
It's like a movie stars.
They're the biggest stars in town, man. Like, the third, fourth liner can walk in and everyone's like gravitating towards.
Oh my God,
him.
it's Paul Byron.
Yeah. Well, what was the hockey wives there? The one in Montreal, who'd they focus on? Was it Brandon Prust?
I think so.
Yeah, and they showed he's at restaurants like with all these people, these important people in Montreal. It's like, and nothing against Brandon Prost, but like it's Brandon Prost, but like everyone knew who he was. He was a star around town. He was getting sponsorship deals with like clothing stores, and his girlfriend, who was a TV personality, was everywhere. It's just, yeah, that's what you get when you play in Montreal.
Yeah, as much as we like to, troll and chirp the Montreal Canadiens, like we know what that organization is all about. And you know what? Them and the Leafs, they're two of the most storied franchises in the league. So anytime there's news, whether it's trades, offer sheets, free agent signings, like anything involving those two teams, it's always fun to talk about, and it's always going to create a buzz. And you got to love that as a hockey fan.
Yeah, man.
All right, everybody. That is going to do it for episode 33 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. Once again, if you are a new listener and you enjoyed the show, it would be a big time help if you go to Apple and give us a 5-star rating and review. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you enjoy the content, we would appreciate it so much if you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Flow.